The biggest of all the huts is the one next to the room where Sri Ramakrishna lived. This hut also faces the south. Previously, this hut was one-storied. After the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, his nephew Ramlal constructed the second story and lived there. The parlour hut is situated next to the double-storied hut. Sri Ramakrishna used to meet people and instruct them here. There was an earthen boundary wall around these huts. Even though the wall has collapsed, the main entrance still stands and is kept exactly at the same spot where it stood over 160 years back. Just outside the house of Sri Ramakrishna stands the over 1.5 century-old mango tree planted by Sri Ramakrishna himself. It stands to the east of the parlour hut and yields fruit to this day. The original temple of Sri Raghuvir was a small hut facing the east. It had an earthen floor and walls and a roof of straw. The present temple has been constructed on exactly the same spot with the same dimensions. The temple holds the shalogram, or a round stone emblem of Raghuvir, the earthen jar representing goddess Shitala, and the Rameshwar Shiva Ling. These deities were worshipped by Sri Ramakrishna, his father Khudiram, and are still worshipped every day. On the northern side of the Yogi's Shiva temple is Haldarpukur, a water tank. The tank has been re-excavated and 2 bathing ghats paved. Many memories of the boyhood days of Sri Ramakrishna center around this tank. In later days, the master often cited the tank to illustrate many of his sayings. Godadhar often came here with his friends and swam and had fun in the waters of the tank. The water of the tank has become sacred inasmuch as holy persons like Sri Ramakrishna, his father Khudiram, and the Holy Mother used to bathe in it. The field of paddy called Lokhi Jola was gifted to Khudiram by Sri Shuklal Goswami of Kamarpukur. Lokhi Jola produced so much paddy that there was not only enough for the little family's needs, but often enough to feed guests and strangers. Every year, during the sowing season, Khudiram would perform the puja of Raghubir and then plant the first few paddy seedlings himself while taking the name of Raghubir. Only after this, the hired helpers would join hands to complete the work of sowing. About 14 miles east of Kamarpukur and 5 miles to the east of Arambagh lies the village of Shorati Mayapur. Sri Ramakrishna's mother Chandra Devi was born here. As a child, Godadhar visited this village with his mother. At present, the Sri Ramakrishna ashram is located over here. On the way lies the dargah of a Muslim saint, Bagha Pir. Both Hindus and Muslims consider it a holy place and offer worship here. Once, Chandra Devi with Godadhar in her arms was passing through this spot on her way to Shorati. Suddenly, the child expressed a desire to visit the dargah. When they went to the dargah, Godadhar became so absorbed in ecstasy that his mother was frightened. Later, he regained consciousness and they were able to continue on their journey. The Lahas were the landlords of Kamarpukur. Their house stood next to that of Sri Ramakrishna's. They were wealthy people, but all that remains today are the Nath Mandir, the Durga Mandap, or the place earmarked for Durga worship, and the Vishnu temple founded by them. This wall is all that remains of the palatial buildings of the Lahas. The descendants of the Lahas live in houses near the temple. The Lahas ran a primary school in the spacious Nath Mandir of their Durga Mandap. The Nath Mandir survives to this day with the original thatched roof replaced by a tin one. A teacher paid by the Lahas taught the children of the village. Godadhar too joined the school at the age of 5 and in a short time learned to read and write. But soon his interest waned. He had a tendency to get merged in ecstatic moods. He liked the recital of the Puranas and the performance of village dramas more than his school lessons. From his very childhood, Sri Ramakrishna was reluctant to learn the so-called money-earning education. Once, the teacher had assigned some sums for the students to work out. Godadhar had a dislike for arithmetic and was unable to complete the task. When his turn came, he confessed, "I know how to add, sir, but don't know subtraction." Once, during a Shraddh ceremony at the house of the Lahas, the invited Pandits were unable to solve a philosophical problem. The 10-year-old Godadhar astonished all of them by suggesting a suitable solution that drew their unreserved praise and blessing. Located within the same compound of the mansion of the Lahas is the Durga Mandap, a pavilion where the Durga Puja was held every year. As a boy, Sri Ramakrishna would come here to see the Durga Puja. Prashannamoyi, a widowed daughter of Dharmodas Laha, was a friend of Chandra Devi. She had a great affection for Godadhar, whom she regarded as divine soul. Sri Ramakrishna also had great respect for her. This structure marks the birthplace of Srinivas, better known as Chinu Shakhari. Chinu was a devout man and loved the boy Godadhar dearly.